All right, everyone. Well, welcome to the Graph Builders Office Hours number 9. We have a special guest here with us today. We have Dylan Meletic of Messari, who is going to be presenting on what he is working on with Messari and Subgraphs. So without further ado, let's introduce Dylan of Messari, give him a warm welcome. And as a side note, if there's any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'll be moderating the chat and communicating to Dylan as needed. So welcome, Dylan.
Thank you, Marcus. Again, thanks for having me here. I will be talking about why I would choose Messari Subgraphs, why you might want to contribute to our repo, and why you may want to use Messari Subgraphs. So I think I will start with this slide here. It's kind of a brief overview of who I am. I studied computer science and then a minor in math at the University of Wisconsin. I've been a software engineer at Messari for around 1 year, mainly on the Subgraph project, building subgraphs and managing the development of that. I recently moved to Denver, Colorado, and my hobbies include climbing, hiking, and traveling. And this is a picture of me from last March in Mexico on a glacier. And just kind of the agenda for today. I already did the About Me section. Wanted to talk about the importance of subgraphs, maybe specifically Messari subgraphs as compared to others potentially. Talk about what it means for subgraph builders and different tools that builders may want to use, and then how subgraph users or ingestors or people analyzing subgraph data may think about subgraphs and tools that they may want to use that we have. And then lastly, a little section about data analysis. Kind of before going into this, my expertise is on subgraph building. So internally, I'm usually supporting users. I don't have like a ton of experience doing data analysis stuff, but kind of have an idea based on proximity, and then a longer Q&A session at the end. But feel free to stop me anytime for questions. So talking about the importance of Messari subgraphs and why I would choose a Messari subgraph. There's a few big selling points, I would say, in my opinion. I think one of the big ones is we have a large breadth of protocols indexed, with over 100 different protocols that we have data in subgraphs for. And then within each subgraph, there's a pretty large depth and breadth of data. So in my mind, we cover almost like every piece of data that an analyst would want on any protocol. We have data aggregated like up to the pool level, up to the protocol level, at the account level, going down into like each position and every position changed. We have all the event data that you would want from any protocol, and then time series data on a lot of that. And I'll show some of our like data visualization tools here soon, to give you like a better idea of what on each of these levels we're collecting. That might be cool for analysis or any derived metrics. And then one of the other large selling points I would say is we have standardized schemas. These are, we have about 5 or 6 standardized schemas. And the importance of using, building on standardized schemas and using subgraphs with standardized schemas is it unlocks a lot of power to create like tools that are querying like the same exact queries across every single subgraph. You can build like one data analysis tool for lending protocols, for example, and then just like plug in Aave plug in Aave v3, plug in Compound, and use the same like source code for the data analysis, and then view that analysis with different protocols. And we do have a tool that does this for all of our subgraphs. And I will talk about later about like how someone might want to build something outside of that using different tooling. I would also argue that our subgraph repo, just found at Messari Subgraphs on GitHub, it contains a pretty wide range of knowledge on DeFi and subgraphs in general. I mean, we've been building subgraphs for about a year and a half now, and I feel like we've run into like most problems that you could face. We've looked at like 100 different protocols in depth and have pretty detailed comments and documentation about all of this. Also, the code itself is documentation. If you're reading like subgraph code, subgraph mappings. And then lastly, I would say we set a precedent for trusted data quality within the ecosystem. Each of our subgraphs goes through a QA process before we mark it as prod. And once a subgraph is prod, we feel comfortable like showing it to our users. And we're essentially like happy with the quality of the data, that it has everything, that everything is accurate. We're comparing against like any third-party sources that we can. I mean, kind of cross-checking, double-checking with the block explorer on event level. And one of kind of the interesting things that we found is that some of the metrics that we have, we can't really find anywhere else in the crypto ecosystem. So we almost have to just do like sanity checks on them and kind of compare them against the like more raw data from block explorers. So that's kind of an interesting thing that we found. Here I'm going to be demoing a lot of the tools that we have. But from a subgraph, I would look at subgraphs from two different perspectives. At least on our end, we have subgraph builders and then subgraph users or ingesters of subgraph data. And like I said, I've been more on the build side of things. And we have a pretty wide array of tools that you would want to use for building subgraphs. And some of them are contingent on using the like Messari standards, just because we've like there's no way to get around like hard coding certain things into the tooling. Let me start with I'll start with I'll start with the subgraphs at XYZ is what we call it. I think this is a good landing page for anyone starting to look at Messari subgraphs. Also, as an aside, I'm going to be like looking at a lot of different links here. So I have a list of like all the links that I'm looking at that I'll share afterwards for anyone that wants to look at them. So like I was saying, this subgraph set XYZ is probably a good landing page for anyone to start with Messari subgraphs. On the if you're building, I would almost recommend starting in two places. One, like in our subgraphs repo, and then two over here to kind of visualize everything. And then go over to the repo and see the documentation and the code. But kind of from a more high-level overview, looking at the kind of visualization of everything. Well, I guess we have a bunch of like statistics here counting up like the subgraphs that we have of each type, and then this is every single subgraph that we have built. This status section indicates whether a green check mark means that the subgraph is like production ready and it has no errors. So you can see all the deployments that have like the green around them, they have no syncing errors, and the data is quality checked. Let me jump into Compound, for example. So this, when you click on this, it's essentially querying the subgraph and pulling up all of the data. And again, this wouldn't be possible without a standardized schema, since we're in the code, we're like writing queries to pull out all of this data, and then you can just plug and play with any lending subgraph, and it's the same for dexes and yield aggregators. And you can see we have like more high-level metrics about TVL, revenue, deposits, borrows, liquidations, different usage metrics about number of unique users, total positions open, all that good stuff. One of the metrics that we found more difficult to QA against was actually revenue on a pool level. We'll see if this, here we go. Okay. This pool actually doesn't have any revenue in Compound. But this is where you get into when I'm talking about like the depth of data. Most other data sources, you don't have like revenue data, surprisingly, on a pool level. So it's loading the time series metrics. All right. So I guess an interesting aside with all of this, a lot of data visualization within here, and it goes on and on and on. It's essentially every single field within our time series metrics just visualized. We also use this tool for our quality assurance checks. So again, like everything is basically open source. All of our like QAs live in issues on our repository, and you can cross-check the QAs if you would like to. So yeah, I'll jump over to OK graph here. So when you are building a subgraph, it's nice to be able to get like a high level overview of how your subgraph is doing, how it's thinking, and then links to any necessary tools that you might want. And a lot of this information is available through the Graphs website. However, I think this is the graph like covers more things. This is like specifically just for developers, I would say. You just plug in your subgraph name, and then you get like links to the bare bones things. The logs are usually pretty helpful here. And then also a link to the visualizer. So as you're developing, you don't need to be looking at like a Messari domain subgraph. This is like one of my subgraphs, and I can open up the visualizer with my subgraph while I'm building it and look at the data to like do spot tests while I'm building it, while it's syncing. I think one of the other, I had a broken subgraph loaded here just to show. It's nice as well, like when you're trying to quickly look at your subgraphs, to come here and just see the error that's occurring and then jump into the logs and get a more detailed look. So going back here, so kind of talking about viewing deployed subgraphs, but then on the deployment level, within the code, another kind of nice to have about building on our repositories, we have this pretty sizable JSON object, but it stores all of the kind of static metadata that you would need to like utilize subgraphs at scale. So this is essentially the piece that is powering a lot of the visualization of like what subgraphs we have here. And why I'm kind of noting this is, as you're building a Messari subgraph, it's in your favor to add the deployment information to this object, so then you can utilize our command line tool to help you deploy. So we have right now I'm deploying to my hosted service, and you can simply run up here, sorry, BH. We have all these different flags to identify like how you want to deploy something, but simply Messari B -D and then enter it comes B3 Ethereum, my target, and there. Typo. And it will essentially deploy component V3 to my hosted service, which is cool. Well, one of the other features that we like, obviously Compound V3 is deployed on, I think, 4 different chains. So instead of having to go one by one and deploying each one individually, you can fire off a -- base at the end, and with the base Compound V3 defined here, you go my hosted service, and it will deploy all 4 deployments at once, which is pretty nice when you're making a change that will affect all the deployments. Just really quickly deploy it to everything at once instead of sitting and doing each one individually and waiting. Just kind of a lot of tools that we've built over time that do save us a lot of time in the long run. Going back to here, one of the other interesting tools that was built by XeroxB1 in the Graph community is Miniscan. And I really like this tool when I'm getting like deep into like trying to solve a specific issue. Maybe there's like, for some reason, there's a spike in TVL in our subgraph, but cross-checking across different data sources, we know that that's probably not true. So I may come into here and look at like the exact contract calls that I'm making to grab the TVL. And you could say like this looks like maybe a bare bones Etherscan. But I think it's that, but it's geared towards subgraph developers. You can jump between a whole array of chains, plug in any contract address, and it'll pull up your start block, which if you are building subgraphs, you need that for the manifest file. It pulls out all of the events and the supply events. You can jump into there, and it'll take you to Etherscan and look at every single supply event. One of the nice things about the like Etherscan, we can make read calls. However, you can make historical read calls on here, so it's gonna be the same, but or it doesn't exist. Anyway, you can make historical read calls. So as you're given the example of there's a spike in TVL, maybe I'm getting token balance from balance of, and something doesn't seem quite right, so I'm looking at the balance of before, the balance of after, and maybe doing like manual calculations on the side to see what is exactly causing the error. So these are nice for this is nice for like very deep kind of small like data bugs that I'm trying to solve. And then so I've kind of covered a lot of the developer tools that you might use. Now I'm going to jump into the subgraph repo and talk about one that we call Schema SDKs, and then price library. The Schema SDKs do require, they're only possible on standardized schemas. And essentially it is, here we go. The SDK is a, it's essentially all of the common and standard functions that you would need to populate the entire schema. All of that is like spelled out here. We know it's like battle tested. It's used on multiple subgraphs. So the subgraph developer only needs to focus on the event handlers and pushing the right data into the correct functions in the SDK, and the SDK does all of the work of aggregating data, creating the time series, data points, and it's sped up our development quite a bit. So there's definitely some like upfront work trying to get the SDK right, but now that we have it for bridges, lending, and for futures subgraph schemas, but you can essentially copy and paste the SDK into the folder that your subgraph is in. I'll jump into a Miniscan compound as an example here. So most of the code for the compound v3 subgraph lives under the SDK, which is again like a standard in our repo. Maybe, I don't know, majority of it lives in manager. So it's probably around like 1,800 lines of code in the SDK. However, the actual mappings that then I had to write for the subgraph, I guess it's still fairly sizable, 1,300. But you only have to deal with the each event, which is nice, instead of each subgraph having to like keep writing an extra like 1,800 lines of code. here I'm essentially just mapping the event, the proper event parameters into the SDK, and it will do all the work to populate the schema. All right, the other thing I wanted to talk about is pricing. So I guess maybe not every subgraph is concerned with like US dollar denominated pricing. However, that's something that we've implemented in all of our subgraphs. And again, subgraphs are they're restricted to anything that's on chain. So if you need US dollar pricing, you have to either derive it from DEX pool, liquidity pools, or oracles. And it gets kind of tricky on some of the smaller chains. Obviously, Ethereum has pretty solid oracle pricing, and there's a lot of major DEXs on Ethereum. However, when you get into smaller chains, it gets a little sometimes like may not have, I guess, pricing built into the protocol that you're using. So we have this price library, and it's similar to the SDK where you copy and paste all of the code into your subgraph folder, your specific subgraph protocol folder, and it essentially like exposes one single function. Then you would need get USD price per token, and you simply just get the USD price. I think there could be a whole talk about the price library, so I'm not going to dive into it, but it's basically comparing against. There's like a preferential list of methods to get price that it'll go through and return the price from the first one. And we do have some like there have been like some extraneous like data quality issues, but we've solved a lot of them in the price library here, and have like some kind of data outlier checks like in the code, so that it doesn't get populated into your subgraph. We have stuff for as many chains as we can find oracles for. Long list now. It covers most chains supported by the graph. So that is a pretty nice thing to use for a developer. This does not require you to use like a Messari Standardized Subgraph. So if you are like in a pinch and you need to get prices in your subgraph and you're not following like a standard Messari schema, that's fine. You can still copy and paste this in and use it the same way. So I've covered a lot of the tooling that we have for subgraph builders. I think one of the other like interesting perspectives are subgraph users. I like to call them ingesters because it's someone ingesting data, whether they're pulling it into their own database, whether they're using the GraphQL server to query things and look at things or look at data, or maybe they built a light app that is querying the subgraph directly and then visualizing the data. So kind of like a scale of how serious you are, or how large of a scale you're ingesting data. So I think before I jump into that, I'm going to talk about where you can find Messari Subgraphs as a user. So all of our subgraphs are deployed on the hosted service, and I know you can. Not every chain is supported on the decentralized network. So real quick, let's see if one of our subgraphs gets pulled up here. So anything with the Messari user is essentially it is the deployment from our source code, and it's always Messari / and you can go into here and see the log. So Messari / this log. And that's, I guess, important to note. If you are ingesting at scale, you would be able to pull this JSON file and then automatically create the subgraph endpoints to query data from through here. So hosted service will have everything, and then any chain that is supported by the decentralized network can be found on here. And ours is pretty easy to. Here's subgraphs with the Messari standard schema are generally pretty easy to denote on here, since we have this little Messari flag. And don't be fooled by, we have deployments from subgraphs.messari.eth, and then also the ARM from network. We do have another address that we deploy. Actually, I take that back. Sometimes the ETH address doesn't pull up. So subgraphs.messari.eth is where you'll find our subgraphs at, with this Messari tag. So look at all the ones that we have deployed. If you are a curator or indexer, I encourage you to help us out here. Not all of the subgraphs have curation signal. So no indexers will want to jump on it. Maybe for some of the more, the less, Polygon is a pretty major chain. But obviously Uniswap v3 Ethereum might be the number one Uniswap v3 DEX. So I guess I'm sure people are familiar with how to use the playground. I just wanted to talk about how to find our subgraphs on here. Jumping over to tooling for users. I've definitely covered a lot of this already. I would say the subgraphs.xyz is huge to get a high-level overview and then dive into any of our time series data. It's essentially, it's not really doing any derived metrics on top of, there's no derived metrics on subgraphs.xyz, which that is where you get into more of the data analysis side of things. One of the, when I was talking about light data apps, is maybe the colloquial term for it. Streamlit has been something that's come to mind for us. We did spend some time building some data apps. None of them are currently hosted right now, but there is like source code for them that you can go and see, like a good like template or a good start for how to build a Streamlit data app. This graphic is not a Streamlit data app. However, you at a light user scale, maybe doing derived metrics using Streamlit, maybe a good option. And just kind of some of the interesting derived metrics that I kind of thought of, like you could look at revenue per user, debt per user. But one of the data apps that we kind of thought up and spent some time like looking at was collateral at risk, or like the debt profile of a lending protocol, and the everything you would need to figure out, like if positions are underwater, if there's any bad debt in the protocol, is available within the lending schema. We built it like with this in mind. So you definitely could get some pretty interesting visualizations and metrics here. See like I said, bad debt. You can look at like which positions are underwater, which pools are at the most risk, and look at things like that. One of the other interesting things, one of the 0xB1, the same community member that built Miniscan, he built this app called liquidated.live, which I checked today and he's no longer hosting it, but it was essentially pulling up like the largest liquidations across all of the lending subgraphs. And I thought that was maybe more in the height of some of the DeFi craze. That was a pretty interesting thing to look at and refresh and see, oh my God, there's another $1,000 liquidation. So kind of that little whip, I wanted to show a small query that maybe if you're doing like very basic data analysis, you could come to the GraphQL Explorer, and how I got there is coming to OKGraph, plugged in the protocol that I want, and I hit API, and it'll bring me to the graphical server or front end. And I made like a small query to see the largest liquidations in, what was it, Compound B2 Ethereum. So it looks like one of the largest liquidations was a, let's see, $54 million on DAI, which is pretty large, but kind of a cool thing to look at, my opinion. And kind of lastly, on data analysis, I wanted to kind of touch again on the benefits of standardization. Our front end uses, we have products that use subgraph data, and they would not be, we would not be able to do it at the scale that we have without standardized schemas. So our front-end developers have like one page written up for lending protocols essentially, and then all the data for every lending protocol just gets plugged into that and shown as a different page. This is maybe the nicest looking UI we have of subgraph data, I would say, and definitely can get into, we don't cover any account level data, but we have everything at the protocol level, and then also the pool level. This is also nice because you can pretty easily like sort between different networks and see the pools and all of the key metrics that you would be interested in, maybe from an investor's perspective. The lending rate has changed over time. 3.6%. interest on your USDC on compound Ethereum base. So I spent a decent amount of time covering a lot of the different tooling and perspectives that you would look at Messari Subgraphs for. I know it was a lot to cover, and like I said, I'll share my list of links that you can explore, but maybe let's jump into the QA. I don't know. Marcus, have any questions popped up at all?
No, but I was just about to write one there.
I see.
Yep, and I'll just say it here. So I'm working with builders out there, and they are using Messari Subgraphs and using the different composability where you could query using one query and have multiple Messari Standardized Subgraphs provide responses. I've had a few questions with builders who are saying, hey, we actually use Messari Standard Subgraphs and build our own with the Messari CLI. I was wondering, for that specific use of the CLI, is there a good location for these builders to start learning how to use the CLI and how to start building their own Messari Standard Subgraphs and really getting that standardization into their dApp?
Yeah, that is a good question. So like I said, our whole, everything is open source that we have. And Messari /Subgraphs is a pretty good place to start looking at all the documentation on how to build subgraphs. I think a particularly good place to start is the walkthrough. This essentially covers all of, like, from start to finish, how you would create a subgraph in our Messari, how you would create a subgraph in the Messari Subgraphs repo. Another good thing to look at is you can look at old PRs that have added new subgraphs. So, yeah. You should be able to search them, but here we added base swap. This one is a fairly small PR since it's a fork of Uniswap, but this is all of the to-dos for building a new subgraph. And then you kind of touched on the CLI. So once you have your subgraph in the deployment.json, here you can use the CLI tool, which we have a walkthrough video in our documentation about. I did share a link to that in all of the links that I have.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. See, Derek said, let's get liquidated.live hosted again. I think internally we forked the repo, so we would be able to, we do have the source code, or 0xB1 might have the source code still. But yeah, that was a fun little app to look at. Might have a screenshot of it. Yeah, this is what it used to look like. We could like slide between, I want to see liquidations greater than, the most recent liquidations greater than $10,000. Jump into them. Cool to see.
Okay, well, Dylan, thank you so much for your time. And if anyone wants to get in contact with Dylan, would you be able to provide contact if anyone wants to reach out to you?
So I am on Twitter, and you can DM me. And my Messari email, if you would like maybe a more formal contact, is just dylan@messari.io. And then again, we are open source, and like you said, people asking about how to build subgraphs, they can either contact me directly through email or create an issue. We're always like looking at new issues on our subgraph repo and can get in touch that way as well. Maybe other people want to be building the same subgraph, so maybe a good place to add like, oh, I'm interested in building this subgraph. Thank you again. I will pass Marcus all of the links that I covered here to share with all of you guys.
Awesome. And I think we have a few questions coming in right now. I see the chat is busy with people typing, so we'll wait for them before we sign off. Okay, we've got 2 questions that came in. Alex says, why is there no subgraphs related to Stargate Layer 0 protocol?
That is a good question. I believe we started building I don't know if you're talking about Stargate deployed on Layer 0, which I'm not sure if that's the case. I'm not sure the graph supports that chain. I'm pretty sure we do have Stargate. I think I know. I think you're referring to the issue in our subgraph repo. That's something that we're related to get around to once we have capacity for, referring to tracking the outgoing amount to the Layer 0 network from Stargate Ethereum.
And another question, are there any protocols you would recommend a new subgraph developer tackle? Maybe something that may need to be built, but it could also be a starting point for newer devs to work on to gain familiarity with the Messari standards for whichever. So yeah, basically, how does a subgraph developer get started, and then from there transition into learning the Messari standard, which is to go from a basic subgraph to a more challenging subgraph development pathway.
And that is a good question, Derek. And we have subgraphs that we're looking to build marked as new subgraph in our issues. This is kind of a hard question to answer, since we've built over 100 protocols, generally looking from like top down, kind of by TBL. So a lot of the main protocols in DeFi right now that have like solid documentation do already have a subgraph for. So a lot of these other ones tend to maybe be more challenging, as there's just less like documentation or a smaller community around. So if you are looking to build like a brand new subgraph, these are the ones that we have eyes on. One in particular, don't know if I have the best answer. How I kind of...
Maybe a little bit of context is that there's a DAO called the Graph Builders DAO, where builders are able to apply to join this DAO and build subgraphs alongside other subgraph developers, which is really exciting. It's an educational and also collaborative community that I'm really excited for. And I think it would be a really good challenge for this group to potentially come together and start helping each other and really learning how to build the standard of Messari. So are there, I guess, any low-hanging fruit of these subgraphs that you know would be maybe good places for developers to get started that are relatively more simple requests, or is that something that I can circle back on and I can get back to the builders?
It might be something better to circle back on for like a list of maybe easier ones. A lot of these, I think, Perpetual Protocol. Again, I mean, this is also kind of a difficult question because I'm not, I mean, I don't know everything about every DeFi protocol. Off the top of the head, it's kind of difficult.
Me too.
There are maybe like a small place to start is thinking about other metrics that you would like maybe want on a subgraph, and you can fork off of our repository and make changes to an existing subgraph. Otherwise, I think in terms of new subgraphs to build, maybe the easiest from my perspective might be lending. I know the schema is pretty large. However, there are a lot of other lending subgraphs to look at for examples. And we do have the SDK. So if you are familiar with like lending protocols, that could be a good area to start in. Otherwise, the schema is generally smaller. And again, there is a lot of like good documentation and other examples in our repo on those. But let me circle back around on like more specifics.
Yeah, we'll chat async, and then I'll be able to, if anyone is listening here, please reach out and I'll be able to continue this conversation about good places for builders to get started with Messari Subgraphs. And then let's go one last question. We've only got a few more minutes left in the hour. This is from Alex. What types of contributions needed the most? For example, from people with a data science background, Python, SQL, GraphQL.
A good question. I think if you're looking at a builder's perspective, new subgraphs are the most useful to build. And then any like subgraphs that are currently down that may have an issue, those are also good things to look at, and maybe an easy place to get your feet wet is if there's like a current issue on a subgraph, maybe like a 100-line code change instead of a few thousand line new subgraph. Kind of an easy in as well. That's high value. And then from a usage perspective, knowing GraphQL and is obviously kind of a necessity. And then I would say in terms of like more unique data visualizations or more data analysis, I think Streamlit has been like the best option that we've explored, which I believe is in Python. You correct me if I'm wrong, but from a usage perspective, Python and GraphQL are probably the more valuable things to know and use.
Okay, well, thank you for your time, Dylan. I really appreciate, and I know we all appreciate, your education, your time, your effort, and also that you are building some incredible technology. So enjoy the rest of your day, Dylan, and everyone who is here today. Thank you so much for attending Graph Builders office hours. It was awesome seeing all of you here. Keep on building, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, guys.